The world commemorates International Women's Day tomorrow. The theme for this year is Women's Day. Well, for this year's Women's Day is Women in Leadership, Achieving an Equal Future in a COVID-19 World. It aims to highlight the efforts of women and girls in shaping a more equal future as we begin to recover from the broad impacts of the pandemic. One such woman is Advocate Lineo Tsiloane, the activist and champion of women's rights in Lesotho. She joins us now via Zoom. A very good evening to you, Advocate. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Globe.
Thank you so much. Good evening to you too and to your viewers at home.
We continue to pay particular focus on women's rights as tomorrow we mark International Women's Day. Now, gender parity is very fundamental for economies and societies to thrive. So what are some of the innovative ways of advancing gender equality and empower women?
I think, first of all, we need to acknowledge that as much as this is supposed to be a celebration, for us as Africans, this is a moment for us to take stock and say, but really, what have we done? Where are we? And what does the discourse mean to us as Africans? Because in as much as our problems are intersectional, we have a specific African problem. Particular, I'll speak about the Southern African context of women being killed by their partners, gender-based violence, rape, and women getting susceptible to HIV and other illnesses. So as we take stock, I mean, there are many ways. First of all, is to engage with social media, which is where the world is. But also, as a lawyer, I feel it is my obligation to also list this one, making access to legal services easy and more affordable for women, because believe you me, women still are the backbenchers in terms of accessing justice. So I believe we have to use everything that is at our disposal to make sure that every and any woman in Africa is able to access justice and knows her status of the law.
Now, studies online, Advocate, have become the new normal due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but internet access remains a privilege. So what can be done to bridge that digital divide?
It's quite interesting that you say this, because just 2 days ago, I had a post where I was saying if men had periods, we would have period holiday. I believe if poverty and issues that affect women affected men, we would have long found issues. So in a similar way, the system is not meant for total equality or parity. Therefore, it's still a misnomer to expect a woman in rural Lesotho, Mokgotlong, to be able to access me in this format. If I was in my paternal home in Halakhafola, Dianing, a few kilometers outside Maseru, this would have only been a myth to have stable internet, stable enough for me to have this conversation with you. Over and above stability, issues of the cost of actually having internet in your home, the cost of actually being able to stay sufficiently online to gain knowledge. So these are conversations that I would feel it's time we start exploring, because first of all, it was existence. Yes, we survived. But are we really living, or are we barely surviving? So this is a question that we need to ask. And at the end of it all comes the issue of who benefits from high-cost internet services. And Lesotho and South Africa are good examples, because as someone that is married to a Kenyan, I can tell you the cost of a similar gigabyte would be very cheap in Kenya. Now, the real question is, why is it so expensive for us here? Are we saying the cost of the machinery is different? Is it just numbers dynamics, or is there a bigger demon that we are all not ready yet to talk about?
It's quite interesting that you raised that point. I mean, it brings into the fore the issue of female leadership. Now, female leaders, as we know, have been praised for their roles in response to COVID-19. And a case in point, the New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, but remain underrepresented in decision-making. How can we fix this?
It's very hard to fix a system that was never intended for your existence.
Yes.
We need to appreciate and go back that we, the people, wherever it was said, did not encompass a black me. So for us to expect to change a system that was never intended for us to exist, it's a bit hard. But there are ways that we can navigate. First of all, we need to solidify as women in Africa, and women that are brown and black, to say, but what do we want and where do our struggles collide so that we collaborate? But more importantly, we need to face the common denominator, which is patriarchy and the system of capitalism that is driven, that has a name, that has a feature, that has a person that we all are afraid to name. So unless we name our problems adequately, we will not be able to handle them. Yes, female leaders will be underrepresented. The reporting about them will be so underwhelming, you will wonder, if these women are doing so great, why are we not hearing more about them? And the answer is simple. Who owns the narrative? Unless the lion learns how to ride, history will always favor the hunter, no matter how rubbish the hunter was.
Now, gender-based violence denies far too women the opportunity to live happy, healthy and fulfilling lives. So what more needs to be done to eradicate this kind of scourge and engage men in this kind of conversation?
Men themselves have to have these conversations among themselves. I feel like it is asking too much to ask the aggrieved to also now re-engage in how they want to engage with the aggressors. And I'm saying this very cognizant that not all men are aggressors. But you see, when people talk about women are gold diggers, not all women feel threatened. Now, what is important is before and more important than men dissecting why they are not what in terms of generalizations that we have had to use as feminists around the world to show how women are in danger. Men must ask themselves, are we doing enough? Are we calling each other out? Are we supportive enough? If we are seated in a room and making decisions, do we wonder where's the female voice? And I'm not saying they should grant us a small seat. I'm saying this because we are worthy. We have run the race. We have earned our stripes. The problem is we do not have XY chromosomes. So instead of the question being, what more can we do to engage men? I think a bigger issue should be, men, what are you doing to come to our assistance? When the issue was race, we were all fighting, women and men alike, for equal rights. But you see, the moment the rights were granted, men relaxed because they could enjoy part of the privilege that comes with being in XY chromosome bodies. I feel like it's time now for the main category and fraternity in Africa to say, but are we doing more for the Black woman? Because Bantu Biko was right. The Black woman is on her own. And unless Black men stand up and show us that they are ready to assist us, we do really feel on our own. And instances like COVID-19 will just put on display what has already been happening. It's quite sad, particularly when you look at small countries like Lesotho or countries that already had high instances of rape, of gender-based violence like Lesotho. Now add resource scarcity, add a pandemic, add having to live with your aggressor in the same house 24/7, unable to travel, now compile all of this and add a curfew on top of it, and a system that still does not recognize that a woman has an urgency of her own. So I feel like I would spin the question and say, but are men willing to come to the table? Do men really hear what we are saying? And are men touched by the plight of African women, or are we only good enough to bear children?
And I also feel that men have been under-engaged in this particular conversation. And Advocate Tsiloane, it gets very complex because of the various cultural nuances that always come into focus when it comes to gender-based violence. Because we see women staying in abusive relationships because of the children, because of the fear of ridicule. So how do we navigate around this issue?
First of all, we need to acknowledge that men are the primary beneficiaries of the systems. These cultures, these norms, these traditions, these habits that we have borrowed down, that we have cascaded with, intertwined and intermarried with colonialism, apartheid, you name it, have been at the hands and at the deliberations of men. So for men to come back and want to say they are under-engaged, honestly, it's unfair. But also they cannot be under-engaged. In most gender-based violence cases, there is a man and a woman. So the representation, whether we like it or we don't, it's one-to-one. So we cannot say they're under-engaged. Yes, they may be under-engaged in terms of finding solutions, but how do you then call your aggressor to the table to say, let's talk? Be that as it may, if this was to be my wish, I'd say to African men, engage with us, sit with us, explore and honestly sit and earnestly interrogate yourselves. Do you feel like you're doing enough to interrogate the cultures that give you so much power? And I say this as a Mosotho woman whose customary law insists on my minority perpetually. So now, if you look at those nuisances, and I hear you that sometimes it's a bit hard for a woman to leave, not necessarily, not because no one wants to be beaten up every day, no one wants to live in a miserable house. But the real issue is, are men available and present to assist and create safe spaces and safe environments for women to come out of such environments? Because you leave Tabo for Tabang, and it's the same story. You leave Tabang for Zwake or Mtolisi, it will all be the same. Now, the real question is, if the aggressor is the same and all cats are black in the dark, isn't it time we change tactics a bit? Instead of over-engaging with women, can we engage with men? Because the same women that we beat up are the women that have borne you. The same women that men rape are the women that they later on will marry, or their sons will marry. Now the question is, this level of brokenness, how long do we think we can exist within it? Because I feel like I'm tired of the whole antagonistic, radical, siyazabalaza way of engaging with men. Maybe if we appealed to their hearts, they'll understand. Would you want your daughter to be raised by a woman as broken as the woman that you hear every other day beaten up by her husband and you keep quiet? If not, what did you do, or what are you doing, or what are you willing to do?
And it's a question that's been lingering for years, and heaven knows when that question will be answered. Now, there's also the issue of female genital mutilation, as it imposes real health consequences. It violates a child's rights, and it also promotes inequality between the sexes. So is it not time to do away with these traditional practices? It has long been time. It has been time to do away with them. And also the elephant in the room is all these practices were done to numb the woman's desire for sex and to enhance the pleasurability for men. At the end of the day, like I was saying before, the primary beneficiaries of these practices, of this what we call cultures and traditions, are men. So don't you think it would help a bit if the same beneficiaries were to say, hold up, we are fine, we're good, we want our women to be happy too. We are no longer interested in women that do not have a libido. We are no longer interested in a woman that have no urges of her own, that has no urgency of her own. We would want to be treated as equal. And I say equality with reluctance, because 400 years of underrepresentation cannot be remedied by 2 years. Maybe we need to start the conversation about what would be equitable at this point. Because what you may need to give to me may differ to what you'll need to give to my mother. And what African men have been getting away with is saying, they can now vote, they can now have access to land. But what I earn and what God forbid my helper earns, places us in different levels of need. Therefore, if you were to say you have done enough purely because you have given us access to buy land, the real issue is, do you think my helper will ever be in a position where she'll be able to buy land? Let's not play semantics here, because I think for the longest of time, Africans labored with this whole idea that if it gets too bad, I'll migrate somewhere else. What COVID has shown us, thankfully, is that to a great extent, we are stuck where we are. Don't we want it to be habitable? Don't you want it to be nice, not just for men, but also cognizant that as a man, you are also going to give birth to a girl, or you have sisters and were born by a mother? Wow, great point there, Advocate. Thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate your analysis and your thoughts on this matter.
Thank you very much. Good night. Hi, Bebo.
You too, thank you. That was Advocate Lineo Tsiloane, activist and champion of women's rights in Lesotho, as the world will mark International Women's Day tomorrow.